Okay, today we will be starting solving one-step equations. One-step equations. Okay, I'm going to zoom in so you can see it a little better. So in the lunch lesson today, we have a vocabulary word. It's called coefficient. Okay, the expression 3x means 3 times the value of x. The numerical factor of the multiplication expression like 3x is called a coefficient. So 3 is the coefficient of x. So remember, 3 is the number. It's the coefficient of x. The model below illustrates the multiplication equation 3x equals 6. So you see here it's been illustrated 3x equals 6. And so if you were to separate it out, you have 3x equals 6. So x will be 2. So you already know that through dividing by 3. But if you see as the picture shows on the algebra tile, each x is associated with two ones. So that's why that 1x is equal to 2. And I do have a PowerPoint I will post that'll show how to model equations. Now let's look here. Now this is what you write in your book. Write an equation that represents each of the models below. Identify the coefficient in your equation, then determine the solution. So you see the equation here. How many x's do you have? How many ones do you have? So the x's equal, so what do you think it is? I'll give you a moment. Okay, if you said the answer here for both of them, let's turn the answer zone so you can see it. 3x equals 12. So you see you have 3x's here and 12 ones here. Okay. So if you were to split them up and pair each x with a row of ones, how many ones is in each row? 4. That's the solution. So the coefficient is the number of x's. It's 3x's. Okay. And the solution is 4. So 3x equals 12. The coefficient is 3. And the solution is 4. Okay, let me erase that so you won't see it. Okay, now, this one, same way. How many x's do you have? 2. How many sets of, these are negatives. Here's a different color. Okay, so this is a -8. These are negative ones. Negatives in front of the ones. So you have 2 sets of ones that have 4 in there each. So it's -4. The coefficient is 2. Okay, and then you have the variable is x, and it's equal to -8. And of course, you can mentally divide 2 into 2 and get 1, and 2 into -8 get -4. That works. Okay, now let's look at the key concept. The key concept here is the subtraction property of equality states that the two sides of an equation remain equal when you subtract the same number from each side. Okay, so you can see if A equals B, then A minus C, or whatever number, is equal to B minus C. So it means you can add something to both sides of the equation and it stays balanced. The words for the addition property is the same as the subtraction, except this is addition. If you have an A equals B, then A plus anything equals B plus that same thing. It still stays equal. So let's look here at the sample. Solve each equation, represent the solution on the number line. So in example 1, you want, from that property, you know that if you add its inverse, the subtraction property of equality, which is the opposite of 8, which is -8 on both sides, that will cancel that out, leaving B equal to -5 plus a -8, -13. So here's graphed. You check. For number 2, you have to add 3.2, 3.2. Okay, and if you were to add it, you see that's eliminated because it's the opposite. So x equals 5.3. It's graphed there. Now I want you to take a moment and do the got it problems on your own in your book. Okay, so what do you do here? What are you going to do with A, right? You're going to add an opposite of 3.3. Okay, it's hard to write with this mouse. On both sides. So basically, you're going to subtract 2.1 minus 3.3. And I'll write it better on the board. So once you are to subtract, that means this is a subtraction problem, and the answer is going to be a negative, okay? So line it up with the 3.3 on top. If you've already done this, I'll just try to write it out so you can see it. There's going to be a negative 3.3 because we had to change the sign because we put it over to the other side of the equal sign. And then you have a positive 2.1. It's hard to subtract it unless you line it up with the larger looking number. So we subtract and you have 2. It's a negative 1.2. That is your A. Everybody write negative 1.2. How many of y'all got that right? Great. Now let's look here. What are we going to hear for B? To get rid of the 4, what's the additive inverse or subtraction inverse? That means if you add a positive 4, that will zero it out. That leaves the R by itself. And whatever you do on one side of the equal sign, you do on the other one. So you add a positive 4. Now plus 4, add it to a negative 6. Just think of somebody, you borrowing $6 from somebody, and then they only pay you back 4. How many dollars do they still owe you? Right, they owe you a negative 2. So that's the reason why that's a negative 2 there. So we can look at the answer turn on. The first one is a negative 1.2 for A and negative 2 for B. Let me erase so you can see the number line. So they just made a number line at 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. Number lines don't have to start at 0. Just start at the number that you're working with. Okay, let's go ahead and turn the page. And we have some more examples. This has to do with the division property and the multiplication property. Okay? Basically, in the division property, if A equals B and C isn't 0, then you can divide by both sides and it still will be equal. It still be balanced. And in the multiplication property, that means you can multiply the same number on both sides of the equal sign and it stays balanced. So let's look at our example. Negative 8y equals 24. So what are we doing on both sides? Dividing by negative 8, y a negative 8, because you want the y, or the unknown variable, to be a positive. So if you just divide it by 8, it will be a negative y. You don't want your variables to be negative. You want them to be positive. So if you divide both sides using the division property by negative 8, you end up with negative 3. And you can check your solution. Negative 3 times a negative 8 is a positive 24. It checks out. And you graph negative 3. And for number 4, this is a division problem. Okay, so the opposite of division, we're going to multiply both sides by negative 4 in order to eliminate the 4's and leave the variable by itself. So if you multiply negative 4 times a negative 9, it's a positive 36. And that is the solution, and you graph. Now I'll give you a few moments to do the got it problems before we start the homework. All right, so what are you going to do? What is the answer? What answer did you get? You're right. You divide both sides by negative 6. I'm sure somebody got it right. Negative 6. So we'll divide by negative 6. So you know the answer is going to be, A is going to be a negative 6 for C. And so what are you going to do on both sides? You're going to divide by negative 9. Divide by negative 9. And some of you all have trouble dividing with a decimal. Don't cause any trouble. So if you divide 9, I'll try to write it out, into your 72, 7.2, you make sure you bring the decimal straight up. And you know you're not dividing 9 into 7. That goes 0 times. You're dividing 9 into the 72, and that will be 8. It's behind the point because 9 times 8 is 72. So that'll be zero point 0.8 and negative 6. Let's check it out. Okay, zero point 0.8 and negative 6 is correct. And you see how the number line was drawn. Now, let's look at, this is a shorter lesson, I believe. Are any more examples on the next page? No, we start our practice. This lesson simply shows you how to do one-step equations. And I believe you did a little bit of them last year. So let's start the guided practice for your work. 1 through 4. Try 4. And there's usually a independent practice. Do 1 through 7. So, and also you have the project to do, and you have your makeup work you need to do to make up the quiz. You've got to do the practice before you get your quiz makeup, and you only have a week. So if you decide to do well on the project, that's a major grade too. That will bring your grade up a lot by making 100 on the project. It may even balance off the test you failed, but you more than welcome to do a retake to bring those low grades back up.